According to my sources, it is in fact a Friday. And I would double check that myself, but I'm a busy man. Now, I have mentioned a couple times, especially if you watch the live streams I do on Sundays on my main channel, that I have an update coming out regarding a book. And so I've mentioned a few times the story of Jay Leno's Turbine Car. And of course, the Turbine Car, for those who don't know, is that car right there, or that little car right there, are models of a much larger car that Chrysler put on the road back in the 1960s. That was a turbine-powered car called the Turbine Car. In fact, the nameplate on the car said Turbine, did not say name or anything like that. It was simply the Turbine Car. And it's actually a brilliant marketing move, because when people say the Chrysler Turbine Car, if you said somebody else's Turbine Car, you wait, you mean Chrysler? So they kind of took over that name. But Chrysler built turbine-powered cars starting about 1953 or 54, all the way through the program running until 1988. And they built about 77 different cars, 55 of which were the bronze blowtorch, as they nicknamed it. And so I wrote a book about those cars that came out in 2010 called Chrysler's Turbine Car, The Rise and Fall of Detroit's Coolest Creation. And that book came out in 2010 in hardcover, came out in 2012 in paperback. It's been in print ever since. It's actually done very, very well. Jay Leno wrote the foreword to this book, as noted down in the corner here, which says foreword by Jay Leno. And Jay Leno has a Chrysler Turbine Car. And in fact, he kindly let me drive his Turbine Car, which is pretty nice of him. But I've since driven 2 others. I've driven 3 of the 5 remaining cars that run, and there's only 9 Turbine Cars left. Several ones in museums out there do not run, and probably could not be made to run without some massive undertaking, because the cars were donated to museums in non-running condition. Now, one of the ones in the museum was made to run. It's a long story. I tell it in the book. But anyway, long story short, book came out in 2010, then 2012 paperback. It's done very, very well. But as some of you may know, Jay Leno's Turbine Car ceased running a couple years ago. And he was kind of baffled as to what to do about that, because you can't exactly take it into a Chrysler dealer and go, guys, fix it. Because parts don't exist, and quite frankly, the expertise to fix it is hard to come by. And so, long story short, at one point in time, Jay and I were talking on the phone. He said, hey, my car is no longer running. Do you have any ideas? And I first suggested, why don't you call the guy who's on the cover of the book, Bill Carey, because he was still around at the time. And he said, I already have. And he said that it's not going to be the kind of thing that, we simply, bust it open and tweak a few parts, put it back together again. It's going to take some very, very serious work. And so I connected him with my brother. My brother works at Williams International. And a lot of this story is out there now, if you poke around, because Williams International was founded by Sam Williams, Dr. Williams, who had worked at Chrysler, and was basically the guy who said, hey, we can shoehorn a turbine engine into a car, make it run. And he led the team that did that. And then right around the time that they started working on these cars, Sam left and started his own company, Williams Research, which became Williams International, which still exists. And my brother just happens to work there. So, long story shorter, my brother talked to his people at Williams, and they struck a deal where they would do what they could to fix Jay's car, using primarily voluntary labor. People who worked at Williams who wanted to could volunteer to help on the project. They had over 100 people volunteer. And then Jay would pay all the out-of-pocket costs, but it was the expertise and the access to the machinery and the equipment and so on that really did it in terms of getting the car back on the road. So eventually, first the engine got shipped to Michigan, then the car got shipped to Michigan, and then people at Williams tore the engine apart, found what was there, did what they could, and so on and so forth. But it took them basically 3 years to get the car running again. And at this last year's Dream Cruise in Woodward Dream Cruise in Pontiac, Michigan, they returned to Jay his turbine car, handed him the keys, and there you go. Fire it up, it runs. And it did. And so I've been telling this story to people, and I've had a lot of people ask me about the story. And I've been following it very closely, of course, because my brother was very, very heavily involved in it. And so I know a lot of the details of it. And I talked to my agent and then my publisher, and I said, hey, look, I'm going to propose that what we do is we put out an update to this book. I don't want to rewrite the whole thing. I don't need to rewrite the whole thing because the original story didn't change. What changed was this story here ends with there's 9 cars left in the world. 5 of them run. One's owned by Jay Leno. There's another one that ran that was in a collection called the Klepts collection. That car is now at the Stahl Museum. So it's in a museum, but that car also runs. And then Chrysler still has 2 that run in their archives. But the sad part is that Jay's stopped running. And I thought the story of how it got resurrected was actually quite fascinating because no one anticipated it would be as convoluted a story as it became. And there were some people who didn't think it could be done, literally didn't think it could be done. And there were some people, I think, working on this, kind of wondering how long it was going to take, but it got done. So I thought it was a fascinating story, and I pitched it to my publisher, and they said, we agree. So go ahead and write an update to that. And so I am working on that right now. I'm literally working on that right now. In fact, today I spent time at Williams, and I also spent time talking to one of the people who had a lot to do with it when it was being worked on by people outside of Williams. And right now I'm just running the story down and writing it up as best I can. And so there's going to be an updated version of this book coming out later on this year. And there's going to be 3 things actually. A new foreword by Jay Leno with just a foreword to this section of the book. And then an updated section, I don't know if it's going to be 1 chapter or 2, but a big chunk in the back of the book that tells the story of Jay's car, what happened to it, how it got repaired, and how it is today. And then a 3rd section will be photographs, because there are photographs all along the way. It's been extremely well documented. And for those of you who don't know, a couple of years ago, the Hagerty Foundation, Automotive Foundation, contacted me and a bunch of other people and said, we want to do a documentary about the Chrysler Turbine Car project. We want to interview as many people as we can and film when being driven and use historical footage and all that. And they put together this beautiful documentary that was released on YouTube. But they also took it to a film festival down in South Carolina that I attended last year. It won Best in Show at the Automotive Film Festival they had there. And it's pretty cool. I got to walk the red carpet, and I even got to sit on stage with the filmmakers and answer questions from the audience. That was a lot of fun. But the interesting thing about that documentary, and I'll put a link to that in the description below this video, is the documentary's been seen millions of times, but it's got Jay in it. And he tells a story about how his engine failed him. And then he tells a story about how he got in touch with the people at Williams. And then he interviews the people making the film did. They interview people from Williams, people working on this car, including some Chrysler retired engineers who volunteered also to help with the project. And so the film has that story in it, but sadly, the filmmakers had to finish the film and they couldn't wait to see what happened. So it ends on an upbeat note, and it says, these people think they're going to get the car fixed. And we kind of hope they do. And then it ends. And so I'll have the opportunity to put some closure on that with the updated version of my book. So it'll have photographs, it'll have the whole story, it'll have a new foreword by Jay Leno. And like I said, I'm working on that right now. So that's the current project I'm working on. People ask me from time to time and say, hey, Steve, you working on any new books lately? And I say, well, I'm working on a new project, but it's actually an update to a previous book I wrote. So the book came out, like I said, in 2010. The paperback came out in 2012. And this will be coming out later on this year. So it's a lot of fun. I get to go back and revisit the stuff, talk to people. The sad part is, the gentleman on the cover of the book, his name is Bill Carey. He passed away last year. He got to see the car run again, but he passed away. Another guy named Jerry Gross, likewise, passed away. He also got to see the car run before he passed away, but he did pass away. So it's kind of funny. This is one of my favorite photographs of all time. That's Bill Carey. He was the guy who would go out in the field and fix these cars when customers had them, the users had them, and they broke down. And he would go out and fix them. And he'd often be out just on the road, someplace in the middle of nowhere, fixing a car. And occasionally, he said there was a public relations photographer from Chrysler following him around, documenting everything he did. And one day, he said he forgot where he was, but he said, I was out there in the field, and I was taking a break, eating a donut. And the guy took my picture and blew it up to 8 by 10, glossy, black and white, and sent it to him one day. And it had the notice underneath it, like they'd often put with a press release. And instead, it just simply said, Bill Carey, Chrysler employee, eating donut. And I met Bill Carey and talked to him on a few occasions, interviewing him for my book. Nicest guy on earth, one of the nicest guys on earth. And he was going through his photographs, and he showed me that photo, but kind of like as an aside. And he's like, but that's no big deal. But here, and I go, dude, no, Bill, stop for a second. That's such a great photograph. I go, number one, I've never seen it before because it was not published. The guy gave it to him, and he just kept it. I go, but number two, think about this if you want to deconstruct this from an artist's viewpoint. You got a young man here eating a donut, as casual as can be in 1964, right? Right. He's leaning against a Chrysler Turbine Car. And the fact that he's so nonchalantly leaning against the Turbine Car while eating a donut is pretty much as cool as it gets. I said, could I please have this photo for the cover of my book, please? And he goes, oh, if you want to, sure. So that's Bill Carey on the cover of the book. And it's bittersweet for me to think about because he passed away. And I went to his funeral. I also went to Jerry Gross's funeral and talked to the family members and also, attended the services and all that. And what's amazing is I think a lot of people go through their lives and they have careers. And when they pass away, someone stands up at their funeral and says, well, the guy was an accountant for 30 years or he's a lawyer for 40 years or did this, did that. And both Bill Carey's family and Jerry Gross's family talk about the fact these guys had these careers at Chrysler. And they worked on other things, but the highlight of them both was the fact that they got to work on these cars. And all you got to do is find somebody who drove one of these cars back in the day or saw one of these cars back in the day. And then they find out, oh, you worked on the car? You repaired these cars? You tested these cars? Oh, my gosh. Such a cool program to be a part of. So, again, Bill and Jerry passed away, but they were instrumental in getting the cars on the road in the original iteration, 1963, but then getting Jay's back on the road in 2024, all those years later. So it's, I think, a fascinating story. It's worthy of updating, and we'll be doing that. So I will have some more timelines in mind soon. As of right now, don't have exact deadlines. I've seen a mock-up of a new cover, for instance. I talked to Jay about the forward just the other day. Talked to my editor, talked to my publisher, talked to my agent. And so a lot of this stuff's got to happen for it all come to, a lot of the stuff has got to happen for it to all come together. And it is coming together, and it will happen. So again, Chrysler's Turbine Car, the rise and fall of Detroit's coolest creation. Updated edition coming out later on down the road this year. And that is, in fact, what I'm working on. When people say, what are you working on now, Steve? That's what I'm working on. So I'll keep you updated, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.